Now you've created your framework, I want to start talking about how can you develop that authentic speech approach. So let's begin at the beginning, which of course is how do you start your presentation? So what do I mean by how do you start your presentation? What I mean is how can you grab that audience, how can you really get their attention so that they're like, wow, this is really something for me. Because there are a number of questions that you need to answer when you start your presentation. The first one, and the most important one throughout the whole of your presentation, is what's in it for me? Now, when I say what's in it for me, I don't mean me or you as the presenter. I mean what's in it for your audience. Because all the time, this presentation is not for you, it is for them. So when you start, you've got to start thinking about how can I grab their attention? And if you remember from when we did the frameworks, I developed the shock beginning strategy to be able to help you to engage with your audience, to be able to help them to go, yeah, this is definitely for me and I'm going to stay listening to this person. And we have these number of options underneath. So you can start with a survey. You could start with some statistics. You could start with a story, a song, or even a saying. But each time, these need to have some shock to them. For example, if you're doing a survey, and when you do a survey, there are a number of real nuances. The survey is raise your hand if, because you're surveying the audience to see if they agree with you. When you do this, oh my gosh, you need to just really get this spot on, right? So raise your hand if you, and the question that comes out of your mouth has to be a question that has got positive intent, which means that there's a high probability of someone putting their hand up when you put yours up. The hand raising in itself has to be timed perfectly well. It's at the end of the question. So for example, you know how I shock you when I ask you when I do a survey, raise your hand if you love the feeling that you get when you've had a really, really great orgasm. Raise your hand, right? So I'm raising my hand at the end of the sentence. So many people will do this too early. So raise your hand if you love the feeling when you've had a really, really great orgasm. Premature hand oration. It's too early. Because if you put your hand up before the end of the sentence, the audience don't know whether or not to put their hand up with you or not with you, because it doesn't feel right because they don't know what to put their hand up to, right? So the hand raise has to be timed. The question has to be a positively stated one. You might, of course, want to shock them with something like orgasms or whatever, but it must be relevant to what you're going to talk about. I use the orgasm because I want people to feel great. I want them to feel great when they're on stage. So that is the little nuance behind that question. You can ask a secondary question. And of course, the question that I ask is, raise your hand if not only do you like it when you've had the feeling of having a great orgasm, but you love the people, sorry, not people, but person that you're with to have a great orgasm too. Raise your hand and say, yes, yes, yes. Now, the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to see if the audience will vocalise that in a room when we've just met. And of course, often they don't. So the shock there is like, oh my gosh, I've only just met her. She's asking me about orgasms. She thinks we're in, groups of sexual activities and things like that. So you remember me, even if it's for a little bit of an odd reason. Now for you, you don't have to be so quirky, but what you could do is you could be like, raise your hand if you'd really like to have more health in your life, and then that's a positive statement, as long as that's in keeping with what your presentation is going to be around. So the question is it positively stated? Is it relevant to your audience? And does it kind of like throw a boomerang out to where your speech is going to go for the rest of its duration, whether that be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or even the full day. Okay, does that make sense? Thumbs up if it does. Brilliant. So if you feel like you've got a survey that you want to do, you can stop the video now and you can go to the workbook and you can start to create what that survey would be. And we'll see you next to talk about stats.